Hey there everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for a new video. I am going to be sharing a card with you using new products from Simon Says Stamps Just For You release, and today's video is also part of a blog hop. So if you'd like to see even more inspiration than what I'm about to share with you, be sure to check out the link below in the video description or on my blog over to the Simon Says Stamp blog so you can see all the participants that are sharing inspiration for the hop. My card is extremely colorful and features a really fun technique of framing a sentiment with die cuts. So we're going to die cut a whole bunch of florals and then use a shadow layer to actually cut them down so that they frame up perfectly the shadow layer of the sentiment. To start first, I'm going to make my background. The background is going to be created with this Quilted cling stamp. It's a new stamp from the Just For You release. And I'm putting it inside of my Misty tool, and I'm going to stamp onto watercolor paper. My plan is to create a simple watercolored background. I'm going to prep the surface first with the new Simon Says Stamp powder brush tool, and then I'll ink up my stamp and stamp this directly down onto my watercolor paper. I definitely encourage you to check out the new brush powder tool because it is a super simple brush tool that allows you to apply anti-static powder onto your paper prior to embossing. I have tried many different powder tools before, and this one is truly the best one I have ever used. And I love that it is simple, it doesn't require any extra steps, and you just turn it over, brush across your paper very gently, and with no effort you have powder applied to your paper prior to embossing. So I've heat set the embossing powder, and now I'm ready to start watercoloring. We're doing an embossed resist, so because this is white embossing powder, you're not going to see it until I start applying the color. It's a very simple background that I'm making here. I'm just applying a rainbow of colors all the way down this paper. It's a lot of fun to mix these colors. Once I have the first layer of color down, then I went back in and filled in some areas and got the colors to blend a little bit more. This is going to set aside to dry. It didn't take too long, and now I'm ready to cut it down with my sentiment. This is the new Sending Love die from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to tape it onto my background panel. Then I'll remove it, and you can see we have our sentiment shadow layer cut into the paper. We also have the sentiment cut at the same time now, and I'm just going to pop that sentiment out of there. So now this will nest beautifully inside of this negative space. My plan is to put this onto a white card base, and I'm going to pop it up so it has a little bit of dimension. This will be really cool because the shadow layer now has a little bit of a shadow around it from dimension of the foam tape. To pop up my sentiment, I thought I'd try using some fun foam. This was a technique that a lot of people used back a couple years ago, and I still have a few sheets of fun foam left over. So I die cut my fun foam with the Sending Love die, and then I just stacked my watercolor piece on top of it, and just like that I have a sentiment all stacked and ready to go. Now the only thing with this is that I actually really like stacking white die cuts with microdot sheets because it's actually fast and I don't have to deal with the liquid glue. So in this particular case, I needed the liquid glue to attach the watercolor paper to the fun foam. But I'm kind of thinking I like the simplicity of the microdot sheets more. But either way, I have a dimensional sentiment, and I'm just going to glue the little dot above the eye right on top. We have our background and sentiment ready. We just need now our florals that are going to frame up the sentiment. So I've die cut a bunch of these blossom florals from Simon Says Stamp. These are the Etched Primrose Blossoms. And I'm laying each one onto a sheet of media grip. This is just to help hold my die in place so I don't have to hold it all the time while I'm ink blending. I'm using a variety of Simon Says Stamp positively saturated inks, and I'm switching between larger and smaller blending brushes depending on what I'm trying to apply. So like for this flower, I wanted to add a slightly darker center, so I switched to the smaller brush. That way I would have a little bit more control of where that color went. Same with the pink flower here. I started with a light color and then brought in a darker one. For the leaves, I'm going to use the Detail Elm Leaves die and 2 colors of positively saturated inks. I didn't do any shading for the leaves, I just did lighter leaves and then darker ones. These die cuts are a little bit smaller, so I did have to hold them a bit more on the media grip, but the media grip held the larger die cuts really well. Now I'm arranging my florals, and I did kind of change my mind as I went along here, so you'll see some of the florals change their placement as we attach more of them. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that shadow layer and I'm attaching it to my florals and then running this through my die cut machine. What that's going to do is it's going to die cut these flowers, and their edge where they meet up with the outline is going to perfectly match. So as I decide where the flowers are, I line up my outline die to the die cut, and then run it through my machine. So I repeated this many times until I had enough flowers to fill around the entire greeting. In some cases, when I did change my mind, like for this blue flower, I just went back in and die cut it again. For some of them, it doesn't really matter where they meet up on the edge of the outline because they're going to get tucked behind another flower. Like that blue one, I wasn't too worried about its edge because you're not going to really see it. So to attach all of these florals, I'm using thin 3D foam squares. This way it has some dimension, but they're not going to be super bulky. I already have foam tape on this card, and of course then I have my sentiment on fun foam. So I already have some bulk here, and I don't want to make the card even more bulky. So the thin 3D foam squares give me just enough lift without adding extra bulk. Putting all these florals into place is kind of like building a puzzle. It's fun. I really enjoyed playing around and mix and matching the florals to go well with the colors in my background. I then finished up by adding a few leaves. This adds a nice pop of green and it breaks up the florals a little bit. These I attached also with those thin 3D foam squares, and I just trimmed some of the stems down for areas where I needed them to be a little bit shorter. For an added sparkle, I did pull out some fairy jewels from Memory Box, and I'm just attaching these onto different centers of the flowers, and then also some of the green ones I added on the leaves. And then the final finishing touch was to finish off the greeting by adding this sentiment that says, "I'm always here for you." It was from a sentiment strip set from Simon Says Stamp, actually an older sentiment strip set, but it's a good one that I had in my stash. So I hope that you enjoyed this project. If you have floral dies and a sentiment die that has an outline, try it out for yourself. You don't need these exact products to create this technique. But if you are interested in the products I did use, I have them linked below in the video description, as well as on my blog for you to check it out. Don't forget to check out the brand new Just For You release from Simon Says Stamp. It's a really good one. Also has some really fun tools that are included in this release, including that brush powder tool I mentioned earlier. There also are some large everyday scissors that I love. I've been using them endlessly. You'll be seeing them in all of my videos upcoming. And then of course today is the blog hop, so definitely make sure you hop on over to the Simon blog so you can see even more inspiration using this release. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'll be back soon with more to share, but until then, I hope you have a wonderful day.